The Vatican, as well as being the spiritual guide for more than 1 billion Catholics around the world, is also an internationally recognized independent state, Vatican City State. Also, just like any other country, it has government departments called dicasteries and ministers and diplomats.
Archbishop Gallagher of the Holy See.
Archbishop Paul Gallagher is one of the Vatican's top diplomats.
Good to see you again, Prime Minister.
His title is Secretary of Relations with States, or in other words, the Vatican's foreign minister. As part of his role, he is the one who often takes high-level meetings with heads of state when they come to the Vatican after they have met with Pope Francis. EWTN News sat down with Archbishop Gallagher at the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican. When we look around the world, in your opinion, what would be the three biggest challenges, diplomatically speaking?
Well, obviously the biggest diplomatic challenge at the moment for the world and for the international community is the war in Ukraine. After that, I think then we have the climate change. After that, I think a lot of the things are the just general conflictuality that we have in the Middle East, parts of Africa, also destabilization of Latin America.
Perdonaci la guerra, Signore.
The war in Ukraine is something that the Vatican has been outspoken on from as soon as it started in 2022. Archbishop Gallagher travelled to the war-torn country where, on behalf of the Pope, he appealed for peace. Now that nations across the world are sending tanks and other military equipment, the Vatican, of course, has no military might around the world, but through diplomacy, what can the Vatican help with or help to try and achieve there?
Well, we can try to keep what I call the dream of peace alive. We can talk about dialogue and peace, which in many areas are words which are not appreciated at the moment. And we can understand that. We understand the suffering of the Ukrainian people, and they're not thinking in terms of dialoguing with Russia at the moment. But what we also can do is maintain, to some degree, contacts with the Russian authorities, through the embassies, through the nuncio in Moscow.
You mentioned there beautifully the dream of peace. You try and keep that alive. And do you find, like when Pope Francis famously went down to the Russian ambassador here and broke protocol, when you were dealing with Russia, are they open to dialogue or is it falling on deaf ears?
Certainly there's openness there, and the messages going backwards and forwards. Not very many messages, but some. I think that much of the commitment of arms by the West and by NATO, the United States and others, inevitably is going to be perceived by Russia as an escalation of the conflict, to which they will presumably make an appropriate response. So I think we've got to be prepared for the long haul.
One of the most controversial Vatican diplomatic deals has been the provisional agreement between the Vatican and the Communist People's Republic of China, known more commonly as the Vatican-China deal. The Vatican has been criticized for allowing the Chinese state to play a role in the selection of bishops in the Catholic Church there. The Vatican says that while this arrangement is not ideal, it was the next best thing. When the Vatican and diplomats like yourself representing the Holy See are going to broker a deal like this with China, what tips the balance in terms of whether you agree to or not agree to make a deal like this?
Yes, obviously the objective is to get the best deal possible, which certainly this agreement is not the best deal possible, because of the other party. They were only prepared to go so far and to agree to certain things. But this was what was possible at the time. It was always going to be difficult. It was always going to be used by the Chinese party to bring greater pressure on the Catholic community, particularly on the so-called underground church. So we just go forward. There have been some bishops appointed. There are negotiations underway for the appointment of other bishops. it's going to be difficult. China, everything is done obviously in the context of Chinese domestic politics and particularly domestic politics, and therefore we can only achieve so much, and we can only achieve it quite slowly. But as one of the things that the Chinese and the Catholic Church and the Holy See have in common is that we don't think in months or even in years. We're thinking in terms of a much longer time.
The role of top Vatican diplomat is not only a symbolic one that shows unity and solidarity between the Vatican and countries across the globe, but it is also an opportunity for the Church to express its views on social and human issues that it feels strongly about, like climate change, immigration, and abortion. It must be incredibly challenging for you and for the Holy See when you're dealing with various heads of state who come here to the Vatican to visit, or your counterparts in various governments, and when their policies can sometimes be so at odds with the teachings of the Catholic Church.
Well, obviously you talk about some things and you don't talk about others.
Is that the answer, just to kind of leave out the elephant in the room?
No. It's not. We're not like that. We do try to raise issues, to show our concern, and to remind people of their responsibilities. We also, I think, try to, shall we say, challenge some of the assumptions about some of these policies. That, for example, that some people say, well, okay, we understand that is coming from a religious point of view. And many people in Europe, for example, would say, well, religion is a rather private, marginal question. Well, we'd argue that no. Religion in the world is something that is important to a little bit over 80% of the people on this planet, and that their religious beliefs have an enormous effect upon them. So we try to maybe change the context in which some of these decisions are being made, and also that if people are wanting to put things, that there has to be respect for conscience, and there is. In many places we see an erosion of conscience, and we will continue to present the position of the Church to those who are willing to listen.
Archbishop Paul Gallagher, it's been lovely talking to you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. God bless.
Vatican City State and the Catholic Church have huge influence internationally, and with the war in Ukraine showing no signs of abating, as well as other human rights injustices around the world, the role of the Church's diplomats will continue to be key for the Catholic Church. In Rome, Colm Flynn, EWTN News in Depth.